Hey everybody, welcome to Nutri-iQ Radio, where we talk about all things food, fitness, and feeling good to help you clear the confusion and get your results your way. I'm your host, Shaun.
And I'm your other host, Jim.
Cool. So we'll just jump straight into it. We weren't really sure how to introduce ourselves, but we've done it now.
Wait, let me try again. I'm your host, Shaun's boss.
I like it. All right, cool. So we thought we'd kick off the show by introducing a little bit about what Nutri-iQ is, just in case you've stumbled across us in your podcast feed or somebody's recommended the show, so you know what you're letting yourself in for. Right, so Nutri-iQ is a brand new way of, as we said in the introduction, helping you clear the confusion that there is all around diet and exercise and just everything to do with losing weight or gaining weight, if that's what you're trying to do, getting healthy and everything in that world, because there's so many conflicting things out there, things that are telling you that you have to do it this way if you want to get results, something telling you you got to do the complete opposite if you want to get results, when really it's pretty simple. And all of those things boil down to the same basic principle, which is what we aim to teach you about, help you make the most of. And we have integrated and made the crux of our smart plan, which is launching soon. And so in case you're wondering what that principle is, it's something you'll have heard of before. It is the basic principle of calorie balance. So if you consume more calories than your body is using up, you're going to put on weight. If you're using up more calories than you're taking in, you're going to lose weight. And if they're the same, your weight stays the same. That's basically all there is to it. And there's a lot of different things that can play into that. And if, for example, you are going through the menopause or you are on certain medications, they just change how those numbers work. But it is just still that in-out balance. Anything to add on that, Jim?
Yeah, I think it's going to tie quite nicely into the topic that we're talking about later. That what we're really aiming to do is to take that basic principle, which is a little bit sort of mathematical and sort of sciencey, and that's how we want people really to see it. But it's also about how you emotionally manage your relationship to that and to the foods that you're eating.
Yeah.
Which obviously is sort of the big one. So yeah, I think it's the sort of the aim of the software is, and what we're going to do with the members is to really tie in those two elements, the science of it, which, like I say, is really basic, but is misrepresented a lot through the fad diets and stuff like that. And then the emotional side, which is where obviously most people actually struggle, and where a lot of the missteps are made by other companies,
approaches.
Those kind of companies,
Yeah.
So it's kind of bringing the human element, merging the human element to the scientific principles that underlie it all.
Yeah. So do you want to give us a bit of a background on what Nutri-iQ was, sort of how it all got started, the sort of journey we've been through to get to where we're at now, and then we can let people know where we are at now, because we've got some exciting news.
Yeah. So it all started a few years back, when I was a couple of years into my personal training career, and basically I wanted to make a system that would allow me to create nutrition plans for clients easily and quickly. So that's sort of the where it came from, where the idea came from. So I made an Excel document that did that, and it was pretty effective. And then I thought, well, other coaches could benefit from this, so I built it, or I got help to build it into an online platform that did exactly the same thing, but just online. And that's basically what it was for a couple of years. And then sort of we brought in yourself and our other business partner, and we've pivoted it so all the stuff that a coach would do, the system now does for you, except you as a member have more choice. So when a coach writes your program, they're taking the details you've given them and they're trying to sculpt something that suits you. Whereas now the system takes your information to give you sort of to structure what it's going to look like, but then you're actually filling it, you're populating the meal plan yourself, and all in a matter of minutes. So it's essentially eliminated the guesswork that would come from a coach and allows you to fill that with your own input, your own sort of obviously informed decision making.
Yeah. So to bring all that together into a nutshell,
yeah,
the way Nutri-iQ and the Smart Plan we've created works is that we calculate your calorie needs, you choose the meals you want, and then we put that together into a recipe book that guarantees results because it's based on just that simple principle, but you've still got the freedom to mix it up because of how the plan is put together, which is my favorite part of it, the mixing it up thing and the flexibility.
Yeah.
And then the other big thing, of course, is the lifestyle side of it and the lifestyle needs side of it. Because like we said before, you've got that basic calories in and out, but then you've got the people that are trying to apply that. And something a lot of people struggle with is you go, right, cool, I know how many calories I need. But then if you've then also got something like being a vegan or being celiac, you've then got to try and find the foods to fit that, which is where it gets complicated. And so what we've done is all the recipes that are in our library, we've tagged them for whether they're suitable for vegan, celiac, vegetarian, pescatarian, anything that you might be, so that whether you're vegan, celiac, or just don't like something like fish, your Smart Plan is tailored to your personal preferences, your dietary needs, and your lifestyle. So it just makes everything super simple.
Yeah, I think it sort of takes the elements that would confuse people, like how many calories should I have, and what types of food should be in the meals, and the stuff that they would usually ask questions about. That's what the system does for them. But then the other side, where the part of the control that a person would always want, which is the actual foods that are going in, whether they dislike them or not, and the flexibility, because most people, if they've tried a meal plan, will know that it's really difficult to try and stick to it rigidly.
Yeah.
And you can have the best nutrition plan in the world, written by the best nutritionist in the world, mathematically speaking, and like actual nutritionally speaking, but in terms of behavior, it's not going to be effective if you can't do it for long enough to get the result from it.
Yeah.
And that was, again, one of our major drivers for this system and how it works, is the flexibility, is making the choices in the first place, but then also teaching you how to be flexible with it so that you're not stuck to the first choice that you made. So yeah, I think that's a major thing, is that flexibility and that decision making on the members' behalf.
Yeah, and that comes down to what a lot of good coaches will say. That simple phrase of the perfect plan is the one you can follow.
Yeah.
And that goes for anything. It could be like a training plan, a nutrition plan, a business plan, anything. If you're not going to follow it, it's useless. Yeah. Even if, like you say, it's technically speaking really, really good.
Yeah. I held back a little bit there because I was going to say like the best nutrition plan by the best nutritionist in the world, but then the best nutritionist in the world would encourage flexibility and not try and force someone to stick to it. But yeah, just like technically speaking, like physiologically speaking, how good it is doesn't matter if you can't do it. If you can't stick to it, it's completely pointless, obviously.
Yeah, and that comes back to that thing we said right at the start in the intro about getting your results your way. because your way is different to your friend Sarah's way, and to your friend Dan's way, and it's finding the right way for you and your flexibility and all that stuff. But anyway, let's get on to the news. So this is kind of a segment we're going to put in every week after we do our little intro, just to let you know about anything that's going on with Nutri-iQ, with I guess anything in the world of health and fitness, anything that's been going on this week. And the big ones we've got this week is a couple of exciting things. A couple of days ago, we hit 2,000 likes on our Facebook page, which super buzzing about, because me and Jim were literally sat refreshing Facebook pages like 1998, 1999.
Yep.
Okay, no,
it seemed to stay on 98 for time.
And now it's jumped way over to like 2020.
Yeah.
But yeah, so really excited about that. And then what we did was we took the opportunity, obviously, you know, you might have seen if you follow us on Facebook, or you might have seen it on other people's pages in the past. We put up a post saying we hit 2,000 likes. Thank you all for your support, and thank you if you're listening for your support, if you've liked us already. And so what we did was, in the caption for that picture, we announced the launch date for the first time of the Nutri-iQ Smart Plan, which is going to be available from June the 1st. So that is the first day that you, any listeners, will be able to get your own smart plan and start working on all that stuff me and Jim were just talking about. So finding the right calorie needs in terms of the meals you want, finding that flexibility, and just making everything really simple. So that's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I'm so excited to finally actually release the launch date.
I know.
It's like, because obviously we've been really excited about it for a while on the build up. But you want to sort of share that excitement because, like I say, the social following is growing and people are engaging, and you know, people are contacting us and asking questions and stuff. And it's just been up to this point, like, oh yeah, it's coming soon, it's coming soon. Now that we've put a date out there, it's sort of like sharing that excitement with the people that have been saying, oh, I can't wait for this to come out, and now they know it's going to be there. So super exciting,
yeah, good stuff.
I think I think it's worth noting as well there, like what we're going to be doing with members on the inside of the membership, because on the outside you've got this amazing product which is going to revolutionize the way that you put together a meal plan or the way that you just sort of diet in general. But on the inside of a membership, you're also going to have that support network from us and from other members in the Nutri-iQ Facebook group. So it's going to be a journey, not just something that you sign up to and you get this meal plan and we expect you to follow the principles. We're going to be with you every step of the way. We're going to be on the inside of that Facebook group, helping you answer your questions, helping you make decisions on a daily, weekly basis. So I think that's worth sort of noting as well.
Yeah, help you navigate that journey once it starts with the plan.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. So that's the news. And now we'll get into our main segment. So again, every week we're going to have the news, and then we're going to follow it up with the key part, so the bulk of the episode. Some weeks that will be something that me and Jim will just discuss, like an interesting topic. It might be something relevant that's gone on, which is what we're on this week, or it might be an interview that I've done with somebody else in terms of food, fitness, and feeling good, to help you guys learn more as the listeners about how all of this stuff works, help to simplify it and give you something that you can go away with to start working on, to start making progress for yourself. And yeah, should we just jump into it? Start talking what we're talking about? Okay, cool. So what we're talking about this week is something that has been on a lot of people's minds since last Monday. You might have seen it, you might not. It's a show that was on BBC Two called The Restaurant That Burns Off Calories. And so there's quite a bit of backlash to it, which is why we wanted to talk about it. And I don't know what Jim thinks of the show, and he doesn't know what I think of the show. We've both watched it, made our notes on it, and we're going to find out what we think. basically.
It's funny that when you suggested this as a topic, the night before that, I had like an hour and a half long discussion with my girlfriend about it.
Right.
Because I hadn't heard anything about the show and I hadn't seen any of the backlash or no idea what it was. And she'd posted something on Instagram, like reposted someone that was sort of complaining about it.
Okay.
And I saw it, and so I just kind of made like a little assessment of what the situation was, and I said to her, you know, oh God, here we go, like another kind of everyone's uproar about a thing, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then we got into like a really pretty deep sort of discussion about it, and about all the things that we're really probably going to talk about today. Before I'd even seen it though, so it wasn't about the show, it was about the premise and whether these kind of things should be made and broadcast and whatever. And then the next morning you messaged me saying, oh, I think we should talk about this. It's like, oh God, I'm going to have to watch it now.
Yeah, what you said there, that you and Abby got into an hour and a half long debate. I said to Jim before the show started that for this segment, I'm going to start a timer for 30 minutes just to make sure we don't go way off on tangents and get super deep, and try and stick to like what the show is and not waffle on too much, which of course we could have a tendency to do. But just before we do get into the discussion, in case you haven't seen it, just to give you a brief overview of what the show is and what it was basically running to show the idea of a new method of food labeling that has been proposed that the government is thinking that they might start to follow. So right now, food labeling is, if you look at the back of your packet, you've got that pretty basic label that just says about how many calories you've got, your protein content, fat content, carbs, sugars, fiber, saturated fats, things like that. And then there's another one that we brought in quite a while back now that you've probably seen on some foods, but not all of them, you know, the traffic light one. So it's a quick guide, so you can look at the front of the food and see how much carbs, sugars, fats, and calories it's got relative to the recommended daily amount. And if it's quite high in terms of relative to that amount, it's red. If it's quite low, it's green. And that was designed to help you stick to those recommended amounts. And the one they're suggesting now is something called the PACE food labeling system, which stands for Physical Activity Calorie Equivalent. What that means is, say your food that you're looking at, for example, has got, let me just find one of the numbers in my notes. Right, can't find it, never mind. But say you've got 400 calories in the food you're looking at, the label would have a picture of a man running, somebody cycling, and somebody on a rowing machine, and it would tell you how long it would take to burn off all those calories with that form of exercise. So the idea is that it was a study done in Loughborough University, and I think there's been some in America as well, showed that if you basically have this awareness, if you are aware of how much exercise it would take to burn off all those calories, people choose to eat up to 20% less in terms of calories. So what the show did to kind of show that to people, they set up a restaurant. It was Fred from First Dates and Zoe from This Morning, the GP from This Morning. And they had a restaurant. People came in, chose their meals. They didn't know how many calories were inside, but in the back of the restaurant, there was a room full of people exercising on treadmills, bikes, and rowing machines. And their job was to burn off every single calorie that was consumed by the diners. And then towards the end, in the dessert portion, when they were choosing their desserts, they did present them with the PACE food labels to see if people would choose differently. And if they did, then the new calorie amount changed as the target for the guys in the back. And eventually they did find out what was going on, and then they talked about whether they might eat differently. But we'll get to that as we get to it, I'm sure, with the notes that we've got. Is there anything else you want to mention of how the show works before we get into what we think of it all?
Well, I think it's worth noting that they they did a couple of segments where they took you sort of away from the restaurant, and they talked about the sort of science of it, like the how genetics plays a part, and how much of your body burns calories, like how much of your heart and your brain burns calories, and your muscles and whatnot, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I like that bit.
Yeah. And I wasn't expecting it. Like as I started to watch the program, I started to immediately pick holes in it.
I was the same.
Thinking you're so out of context. I got my calculator out, and I was like, I'm gonna prove how poorly out of context you are.
Yeah.
But then they talked about that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the sort of backlash and the problem that people have got is the formatting of the show. Like as a premise, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it's how you present that information. And for the show, I think it was just poorly sort of presented. Like the information that they were putting across was just prioritized in the wrong way. I don't know. Where do you want to start? Because there's so much.
Yeah, well, my sort of overall summary was, I think, before we get into it, the pace food labeling system in general, are you a fan of it or not?
No.
Okay, also not. So just like I said, we probably went into it with a bit of a bias of, I don't like this food labeling thing, and so we were going to pick holes. And I did the same as you. I started picking the holes, and then I went, oh, actually, but they've actually explained a useful thing there. That's quite good. And basically, I thought it would be good to go right through, basically start to finish, because that's the way our notes are probably going to be, and just see what kind of stuff we've picked up on. Some of the things, obviously, we're going to say that's not very good as a representation, like as an explanation, they didn't do that very well, or that might confuse people. But then also we're both going to have things we know now that we think were good and maybe could have been better or whatever. So
yeah.
You want to just take it from the top?
Okay, so I think, excuse me, I think the study from Loughborough is very interesting. I don't like the idea of implementing it. But I think it's an interesting thing, like when people see that, because it says a lot, not just about like people's behavior, but also about sort of how society sort of influences that as well, and how the whole sort of nutrition and food industry plays a part in people's decision-making process. But the setup of the restaurant was just confused. I was so confused by it. Like, it didn't really make sense to me. First of all, I'm not saying this would be a good idea, because this would be even worse and get more backlash. But if you're going to go for it, go for it. Do you know what I mean? If I was going to do this as an experiment, just as an experiment, not as a TV show to be broadcast, I would say to them, I would get them eating whatever, and then I would say, all right, whatever decision you make, you're gonna have to burn it off on the machines. You know what I mean? Okay. And see how that, because ultimately, like, that's the point that they're trying to make. And I don't know, it just didn't make sense to me. They revealed it at the end, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, these people have been burning off my calories."
They look horrendous.
Well, at least I don't have to do it.
Yeah, because then they just start clapping, and they're like, "Oh, you guys are amazing."
Yeah.
I didn't do anything though.
There's no point. Like, so the idea is consequence. That was the whole point, the whole premise. But there's no consequence in that scenario. Not that I'm saying that there should be, but just as an experiment, I think really like that would make more sense. So I feel like what they were basically saying, or what it sounded like they were saying, is every calorie you eat, you have to burn off intentionally.
Yeah. That's what I wanted
that was
to
the
say as well.
immediate sort of point. That's why I got my calculator out, because I was going to calculate. They were saying you eat this much. Keep whacking my thing. You eat this much. You eat this burger. You have to spend this many minutes on a rower.
Yeah.
And in my head I was going, well, you don't, because
Mm-hmm.
through the day you're already doing that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to pay it back. The process is that your body already pays it back. That's the whole point of calories in, calories out. So immediately I think the premise could have been changed to, if you don't want to gain weight, if you don't want to gain body fat, then whatever you eat over the amount that you're expending would have to be burned off somehow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which they touched on it. They touched on the calories in, calories out, and then how much comes from exercise, etc. But it was like a side note.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that really should have been the priority.
Yeah.
Is that, look, most of the stuff you eat is going to get burned off. That's what you're doing through the day. You're just constantly burning calories. So why you eat in the first place?
Yeah.
And then also, I don't know, maybe you've got something to say on that before.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, like, what we're talking about there, that's the issue that a lot of people, a lot of coaches have with the PACE labeling system in itself, because the labeling system says to burn off 400 calories, you'd have to do X amount of exercise. But as you said there, you don't. And that's something they explained, because the doctor, Zoe, explained to Fred that she sort of filled up a little glass with beans and said, about, I can't remember the number she used, but just for simplicity, let's say she said 50% of your calories that you need each day are used by your body, just keeping you alive, just those basic functions in terms of everything that happens that we don't even think about, and we don't have to think about, and that's the point. And then say another 20% is your, I don't know what she used for it, but what we normally call the thermic effect of eating.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, she called it, I got it written down, she called it DIT, so...
Yeah, digestion-induced thermogenesis or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So basically, when you eat food, that process in itself of chewing, of swallowing, of the food moving around your digestive system, that all takes up energy. And we don't need to get as deep into it, but some foods use up more energy than others to break down, and that's that section of it. Yeah. And then she said,
I think, sorry, just while you're on that thermic effect of food as well, she said that you can't influence that a lot. Mm-hmm. But actually, where you've just said there, some foods cost more energy to go through the process, isn't small. Like, it's not marginal. Like, carbs and proteins are like between 3 and 6%. Mm-hmm. So if you eat 100 grams of either of those, you'll use sort of 3 to 6. If you eat 100 calories from those, you'll use sort of 3 to 6 calories in the digestive process, whatever. That's protein and carbs. No, it isn't. It's fat and carbs. And then protein actually uses 30%.
Yeah.
So you use a lot more energy in the assimilation of protein than you do the others, mm-hmm. which is sort of one of the factoring reasons why sort of higher protein diets are a little bit better for fat loss. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the calories that you eat from the protein gets used, like a third. It's massive.
Yeah.
But then it's also, again, sort of important to note that even that, like, is only 10% mm-hmm. of the food that you burn in a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's still a sort of the calories that you burn, still a small amount.
Yeah. So then the other thing, the final section of your daily calorie use, Zoe explained, was your physical activity, which is all of your movements every day. So if somebody's watching this as a podcast, they'll see me waving my arm around and moving my hand as I'm explaining things. And that's getting up out of bed, brushing your teeth, sitting down on the couch, standing back up. It doesn't have to be exercise. It's just moving at all. And there's a lot of energy that gets used just doing that. And then the exercise specifically is, again, a portion of that physical activity overall. So really, your exercise only accounts for, we don't know the exact number because it ranges depending on what you're doing, but say it's somewhere between, like, up to 15-20%, if that.
Overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the issue with the labels then is where it says, say you've got 400 calories to burn off, that's going to take you this long on the bike. Really, it should say 400 calories, 15% of that is this much, which would take this long. That will kind of make more sense in terms of how things work, I think.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just think, I don't know if, this is why that's why I don't agree with the labeling system, because there's no way to put it on a menu that puts it into the right context.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's, like, fine if you sort of want to say, if you you just can't do it in a simple way. You'd have to say to people, look, you burn a certain amount of calories in the day. You are going to eat a certain amount of calories in the day.
Yeah.
If you burn this much more, it will take you sort of this much exercise on average to burn what you've eaten. Like, that's how you'd have to contextualize it.
Yeah. And then there's also the fact that every person who does that exercise will get a different amount of calories used up. So that doesn't work as well. And I think they mentioned that briefly as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they said, like, it's not obviously 100% accurate, and they kept saying on average. But that's a little bit of the problem, is that it was, people don't listen to, like, me and you are going to be sat there watching it, and we're like, we've got our notes out.
Yeah. Like analysing
we're listening to this,
saying.
and there's stuff in there as well that I find interesting that I didn't know. And then there's other stuff that I tell people on a daily basis, and then they say it and I go, great, yeah. But, you know, Sally, who has zero interest in any of the science, all she hears is, bloody hell, if I eat 700 calories, I'm going to have to do this much rowing to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, the whole thing of broadcasting it, the information's not bad if it's in the right context, but broadcasting it, I think, is a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I found a specific example that I wrote down that they gave of the numbers, in case anybody listening wants to know what it is as an example. So the numbers they presented was, there was a 463 calorie cake, a cheesecake or something, for dessert. And they told us that would require 40 minutes of running, 58 minutes cycling, or 67 minutes of rowing.
I remember that.
That's a lot.
Let me tell you why I remember that. Because I looked at that and I was like, what? Like, I hate rowing. And I don't mind running too much. I've been doing a bit of running recently. And so that was like 40 minutes of running is the equivalent. This is irrelevant. 40 minutes of running is the equivalent of 67 minutes of rowing.
Yeah.
But I could very comfortably run for 40 minutes, and I wouldn't last 10 minutes on a rower before I was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I
was shocked by the difference there in those two.
Yeah.
It's not really relevant to the point. But.
And the way you're thinking about it there is similar to what I thought, and I think comes into what a lot of the backlash came from. So just briefly, a lot of the backlash was from people with eating disorders, people currently struggling with eating disorders. Some of the specifics on that I've got written down. So the eating disorder charity called Beat, they received 3 times as many calls the following day that when the show aired than they normally would, with the majority of those calls referring to the show. And so at first glance, you might be thinking, well, why is that? But basically, something that I think it was the person who runs the whole thing, she said the way the show was presented was almost like the perfect example of someone with an eating disorder's mind of how they think about things. And, the two sort of major eating disorders we think of are anorexia and bulimia. And so anorexia is restricting food and basically not allowing yourself to have that to an extreme extent, obviously. And bulimia is purging food, and that purging can come through vomiting so that those calories aren't being absorbed and you're not going to gain weight and things like that. And the other way to purge is exercise. And so that last part, purging through exercise, is exactly what the show was presenting as just a normal thing, just a sensible thing to do. When for people who were in that frame of mind, that set a lot of people off, as in, oh, but now it's on the BBC too, so what I was thinking was right all along, sort of thing. Like, that was a lot of the issue. And I get it, because what you were talking about there with the way you were thinking about the numbers, obviously you and I understand, because it's our job. We understand that it's not the full 463 calories that you have to burn off. It's 15%, if that you have to burn
potentially
off.
Not. Like,
yeah,
like you like,
say, like, on a broad scale, say like 15% of everything you eat is exercise, then just for argument's sake, 15% of the 463 needs to be burned off. And I looked at those numbers of the 40-minute run, the 58-minute cycle, the 67-minute row, and I thought kind of the same as you. I like cycling. So a couple of days ago, I was out for an hour cycle. I'm going to go out again later today for an hour's cycle. And I was watching the show thinking, but if I was thinking in my head that I had to go out for an hour's cycle just to sort of deserve, quote unquote, this piece of cheesecake, which is something I really like, that would make me not want to enjoy I wouldn't enjoy the cycle, because I was like punishing myself for the cheesecake.
Yeah, it's like payment.
Yeah, and so like just thinking about things in that way is not good for you. Because number one, you don't need to, and number two, that does ruin that relationship with food. Which is something that I think was noticeable towards the end when they started explaining what was going on.
Well, there was a bit where they one of the women said that her son was getting married that year, and so she changed her mind about the dessert she was going to have, because they showed how much work she'd have to do to deserve it. And that was like, when I seen that, I was like, yeah, wow, I can really sort of see where the uproar is going to come from.
Yeah, you could see it in her face.
See the guilt on her face.
Yeah, if somebody hasn't watched it, like, honestly, just watch that and you'll understand straight away from that section how mentally impactful this is. Because I've written down here, Angela looked gutted because she was saying, I've got my son's wedding coming up, I need to lose a stone. And she ordered like sticky toffee pudding maybe, and she obviously was looking forward to it. It's probably her favorite dessert. And then she was presented with this information, and she said, oh, I guess I'll just have to switch that for some water and ice.
Yeah.
And her face was just
and like, the thing is, like, you've got like the element of guilt of like, oh wow, I was actually gonna do that, and it was gonna cost me this much energy. But then there was also she wanted their sticky toffee pudding.
Yeah.
Now, and she's like self-deprived it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big.
There's a couple of things on that I want to note as well. So as that part of the show was happening, just after they did that, and Angela looked devastated that she couldn't have her favorite dessert, a girl on a different table, the way Fred sort of said it was like they didn't care. And it's like, yeah, they didn't, but that's a good thing to me, because the girl who didn't change her mind said, it was worth 100 something calories, I enjoyed it. And I was like, yeah, like that's the way it should be. Like, you don't have to think, I've just taken 100 something calories and I enjoyed it, but now I've got to go and burn that off for half an hour on the treadmill. It's just, I just had a nice dessert. End of story. Like, that's it. End of the show.
I think as well, like the context of those people in the restaurant was a wrong fit for their message that we're trying to kind of get across, because they banged on about averages a lot. And something we do a lot with Nutri-iQ is we talk about averages, which is why, like, you shouldn't beat yourself up if you go outside of your goal, so target calories for the day or for the meal or whatever it is. Because as long as you're following the sort of process, it'll average out to what it needs to be, kind of thing. And the people in the restaurant were out celebrating, like they were out for birthdays or like family meals and stuff. So it wasn't a matter of, well, what are you having for tea tonight? It was a matter of, they're out on an occasion for a family member's birthday, where if we're coaching people, we'll say to them, I'll say to people, when you go out for a family meal, I don't really want, like, if someone said to me, I want to step on stage, right? They've got like a really specific sort of calorie need to get there, and that's the goal. That's what they want, and we're going to do what we can to get them there. Then yeah, fine. Track all the calories that go in your body. You're going to have to if that's your goal and you want to get it. But when you're just talking about general, like losing weight over a long period of time, then you can't carry it around with you in every scenario and every second of your day, including like celebrating family birthdays or doing whatever. You should just be able to enjoy those situations, and then also not sort of pay for it. Do you know what I mean? Not be like, oh, well, I am going to enjoy it, but tomorrow I'm going to deduct all of those extra calories from my intake, or I'm going to go and work it off by doing this many minutes. Because you just use the law of averages. There's just, the major concern for me was context. There's just no context to it, to the whole program and the whole premise. And that's where, coaching is so vital, because that's what coaching does. Is it just offers context to every situation, as opposed to having blanket rules for things. Like, can do this, can't do that. You can't live like that. You can't live on those kind of black and white rules.
And something so after they revealed to the diners what was going on, and they went into the back room where all the exercises were, and they started discussing between them what was going on and what they thought of it all. There's a couple of things. So Angela, the woman who changed their dessert, trying to get ready for the wedding, looked devastated about the situation. Even they actually said Angela's got pudding envy. Like, they actually said that in the show, and I was like, well, that's not good either, is it? Again, so like, that's going to be a tangent, and we said we're not going to do that too much. So Angela said she thought it was going to be useful to have those things on menus. But then somebody else, and I didn't get her name through the show, but she was from the same table as the girl who said it was worth the 100 calories. I enjoyed it. She said, but I wouldn't want that on my menu, because I just want to relax and enjoy my meal. And so that just comes back to what you were talking about there. For a lot of the time, especially if it's going out for a meal, that is just something to go and enjoy. You shouldn't have to be guilting yourself or second guessing yourself and things like that. So you can have both. Like, I was thinking something that another one of the diners said, Preeti. She said, well, it's a treat and I don't have it every day. And that's the right way to think about it. That's something I thought about a few times through the show, because these people were having a 3-course meal, which obviously just racked up the calories for the people in the back having to burn them off. Whereas most of us don't have a 3-course meal at every meal. And so, again, that kind of misrepresented the numbers, because it was saying each diner hit over 1,000 calories at their meal, which makes you think, oh my God, that's so many. Because you then think, but I have 3 meals a day. Am I eating 3,000 calories? And you're like, no. Because, again, it's just kind of confusing.
I think there's kind of, I don't know the last time I had a 3-course meal. I can't remember. A long time ago, and I'm quite a big eater. And the actual foods themselves, they said the lowest calorie option was 700 and something calories, which is quite high. Like if you went to a restaurant and they didn't have anything less than 700 calories,
yeah,
like you're in like a very indulgent restaurant.
yeah,
So again, not realistic to a real life situation where you could, you've got a bigger menu to choose from. They obviously had purposefully populated it with high calorie meals. Plus, when they were, what did he say about? Oh yeah, the amount of calories that they'd eaten in the restaurant averaged
1,654. I've just looked at it.
That's massive, isn't it? That I think the only good that sort of did was to sort of highlight how much calories are in restaurant food.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and again, it's not like there's no like, so what if you want to go and enjoy it, whatever. But a lot of people won't realize because they'll go to a restaurant and get a chicken Caesar salad.
Yeah.
And when they made it at home and they sort of calculated the calories for it, it was 300 calories. And then they go to a restaurant to have it, and it's like 700 calories.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is quite good because it comes down essentially to restaurants, just willy-nilly putting, dressings and whatever on food,
mm-hmm.
Or cooking it in a certain way, especially to save money a lot of the time, which just sort of gets the calories like super high on them.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of an eye opener.
So just to jump in, I started that timer for half an hour, right? It's got 3 minutes, 15 seconds left. So let's really quickly just go over some of the good things, the things that were useful about it. So we mentioned that they did explain how calorie balance works in terms of like the calories we use every day. They explain that we use calories when we sleep, that men need more energy than women, which is something that a lot of couples might struggle with, because if the female partner is always having the same size meal as the male partner, and you find yourself thinking, well, Dave eats whatever he wants and we eat the same, but I'm fat and he's not, that could be why. If you're having the same portions, you don't need the same portions. That's like a really important thing to note. And then they got into the genetics thing, which I think in itself was a bit confusing, because one thing he said, which was good, was that he said genetics don't determine your body weight. But then they went on and talked about like genes that will make you fatter, and skinny genes, they called them as well. And so when you start thinking about those things, you're like, well, I probably have the fat gene because I'm fat. Or like, oh, well, Sheila's definitely got the skinny gene because she's skinny. And it can kind of take away the responsibility.
The presenter, I can't remember her name.
Zoe.
They said they measured her blood and they said you have got the fat gene. But she's someone that the people around her probably, they know how much she exercises and how active she is. You can see she's in good shape. So they probably, like you say, would look at her and go, she's definitely got the skinny gene. Like definitely. Like, whereas it was kind of interesting for me, but at the same time I feel like pretty useless, because they're saying, well, the information is only relevant to the person if they know that they've got that gene, which they don't. No one does.
And even then, what difference does it make? Because your choices are still just going to come down to that calories in versus calories out, despite the genes that you've got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point that they made about like the FTO gene, which was like the sort of bigger sort of indicator gene for the likelihood of becoming overweight by a certain age, they said is dramatically reduced through exercise, which is like, okay, if I took someone and I measured the blood and I said, you've got this gene, it means you're more likely to get fat. If they know that, then they might go, oh, well, I've got the gene, like it's just built into me. What can I do about it?
Then. Yeah.
Like, whereas if you say to them, well, if you exercise, you reduce that by 50%, But you don't have to tell them that if you didn't tell them they've got it in the first place.
Yeah, because
You know,
it's the same as just saying exercise helps you not gain weight. Like, you don't need to have that bit in the middle, which just complicates matters.
Yeah.
In a way.
It's because the overall message is the message anyway. Like, obviously exercise.
Yeah.
Exercise. Everyone should exercise.
Yeah.
And that ultimately you can say it without tying all that to it.
Yeah. And the sort of like the last quote from that section of the show was where the guy, I can't remember his name, he said, body weight is not a choice. And I was like, well, insofar as saying today I'm going to be 68 kilos, that's not a choice. But the behaviors that you can build for yourself and the environments you can put yourself in and all those kinds of things we talk about, like you said, in terms of coaching people to help them understand things, they are choices. And you might have these genes that make you more inclined to choose higher calorie foods, but just because you've got that inclination doesn't mean that has to be the decision.
Yeah.
And so that was the issue I took with like the final segment, like the final part of that segment, saying body weight isn't a choice, because then it gives you that kind of defeatist attitude of, why bother trying?
And it's a tricky one. It's not black and white, because ultimately you can't say, right, if we was to say it's entirely not genetic, and those that are overweight, it's just because they're not disciplined enough or don't have the willpower.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say that, because there is genetics involved, and that's the major element that the genetics influence is the willpower. Like, if I'm someone who's got the skinny gene, then when I'm tempted by something, on a scale of temptation, it might be a 3 because of my genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas someone else might be an 8.
Yeah.
So it's not just that I've got willpower and they're lazy. It's that they're fighting a bigger battle than I am in that regard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then at the same time, if you go around saying, it's not a choice, it's genetics, then like you say, it's defeatist, and people just go, well, it's written into my code. Can't choose my parents, but that's it. I'm going to be overweight. Can't do anything about it. It's such you can't put it on a TV show, because it's just not black and white.
Yeah.
And TV shows are for things, as far as I'm concerned, for things that are black and white. It's for facts.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who's watching.
Yeah.
And the major issue I take with this TV show, which is actually something Abby mentioned, is the timing of it. It's just awful.
Yeah.
Because we're in lockdown, and they're basically saying, you have to do the exercise to burn off the calories. Everyone's like, well, I can only do an hour of exercise a day. Like, I'm locked in. It's so much harder for everyone to do that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the time that they broadcast that. It just seems like you couldn't have picked a worse time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the same. And just, like I said, we've already gone over our half-an-hour limit. But I just want to mention, like I said, the way they said body weight is not a choice, and I wasn't a fan of that. I just want to mention one more thing that they said in that segment, and then I think we should talk about the environment segment, because that was a good one as well. But the thing that they said in that segment, the woman that was looking at the skinny jeans, they were looking at a particular gene, and she actually said the words, "This single gene is enough to keep a person thin." And there is no way that is true, because if that person with this skinny gene eats 4,000 calories a day, they will not stay thin. Like, that is just not the way it works. And again, I don't want people to have watched the show to have heard that quote from that lady and to think, oh, well, if I don't have the skinny gene, then I'm not going to stay thin. Or, oh, for some reason, I've had this test and I do have that skinny gene, so I can do whatever I want. That's just not true. And I just want to make sure people know that there's no single gene that will keep you thin. There is no single gene that will make you fat. because there's so much else going on with it. There's so many factors to the obesity epidemic, pandemic, whatever we call it. And a big part of that is the other segment we're going to look at, which is the environment.
Yeah. I think just on that, what you just said there, I think it's a representation of the information. Like, the information is so interesting, like what she was pulling up those. But all they're really doing is they're taking a large number of people, they're seeing which ones are overweight, which ones are skinny, and then they're looking at the genetic codes, and then they're finding an average. So more of the people who were skinny had the skinny gene, and more of the people who were overweight didn't. So it's literally just a likelihood factor. It's like driving a red car. Insurance companies bump up your premium because you're driving a red car, and on average, people who drive red cars crash more often. That's exactly the same kind of statistics.
Yeah. But the reason
that doesn't mean if you drive a red car, you're going to crash. Yeah. Like, it doesn't mean if you've got a red car, you're going to crash, and it doesn't mean if you buy a black car, you'll never crash it, so you can drive however you want.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a statistic, which is overall is interesting, but you can't use it to bloody build a lifestyle on.
Yeah. So let's move on to the environment section, and then we'll wrap it up. And in my notes, I've got little minuses next to things that weren't very good, and then little pluses next to things that were good to mention. And in the environment section, everything I've got is a plus. I thought it was a really good section. There's one minus actually right at the end of it. But what did you think of the environment section? Do you think
I don't know if I've seen that section.
So they were walking around the streets in Cambridge, and they were saying about how much food advertising there is and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I caught a glimpse of that, but I think I nipped off to talk.
Okay, right. So I'll just get into it. So what they were saying was the environment plays a massive factor into the way that we think about food and the way that we act around food as well. So I can't remember the name of the lady that was in that section, but she sits on government boards to help advise on nutrition recommendations, things like that. And she was explaining how we are always encouraged to eat everywhere we turn. And they showed, like, walking down the road, there's on one bus stop, there's an advert for Costa, there was an advert for McDonald's, and there was an advert for KFC. And so what she said was, every time we see food, it makes us want food. And I thought that watching the show, because when they got to the dessert section, they were talking about the desserts, and it made me start thinking, I'd love some chocolate fudge cake with ice cream right now, because that's my favorite dessert from a restaurant. And that's just the way we think. If we see food, we want more of it.
And well, that's what it's designed for. Like, there's a whole science
that's
to the
why
marketing
advertising is the way it is. And so they said, you know, something that the government is also looking at, but a lot of people are sort of saying they wouldn't have the cojones to do, is to ban advertising for junk food, like full stop. And they were saying that they might do it initially before the watershed, so you don't see any junk food ads before 9 o'clock or whatever time the watershed is. I can't remember. Just so that sort of kids are less likely to see it, so that people generally are less likely to see it, because again, if you see it, it makes you want it, and that's the way advertising works. And the thing that she also said actually that I liked was that she did sort of get to the point that despite all of this, at the end of the day, you gain weight if you're eating too much, if the food goes in your mouth. And yes, there are a lot of things going on that are trying to influence you to eat that food, but it is still whether the food goes in your mouth or not. And let me see, she said about us living in an obesogenic environment. And that is true. That is fact. That is why so many people find it so hard to lose weight, because everywhere you turn, something's trying to make you eat. There's an advert for, like I say, a McDonald's, a Burger King, Costa that's full of calories, even though it's only coffee, which is surprising to a lot of people, and you don't think about it because you're drinking it. And a specific number she gave us was that there are a third more fast food outlets today than there were 10 years ago. So the environment in terms of how obesogenic it is has also just rocketed, which is going to, again, make things harder.
Yeah, because I think you've got like the whole discussion around guilt, and you know, saying to people you shouldn't be eating this or there's too many calories in that. That's one thing. But ultimately, and she brought up smoking, I believe, at that point as well.
That's the thing that I wasn't sure on.
Well, when I spoke to Abby about this, a lot of our conversation was about whether, you know, what should the message be? Should you even be doing it at all? And I sort of brought up smoking. So, and it is obviously different because you have to eat. So we're talking about managing something that you have to do, not, you know, something that's completely pointless, but you can do it if you want to do it, like smoking. But my point was, well, look, you know, they banned the whole thing on smoking because if someone wants to smoke, we tell them the risks, they decide whether they accept those risks or not, and then they do it. But the two key elements are, A, you tell them what the risks are, and B, companies aren't allowed to advertise to, you know, to trick you into thinking that you should be doing it or to entice you into it. And I think the same definitely should apply to fast food. Like, ultimately, being overweight is a health risk. It makes you more susceptible to heart disease, diabetes, etc. On average, and again, like smoking, you could smoke your whole life and live to 100. Yeah. Like, it can happen, obviously, but you're more likely not to do that than if you didn't, right? Same with food. Same with being overweight. You can be overweight and just enjoy the rest of your life and live long and be completely happy, and it doesn't cause any health issues. It can happen. You're more likely for it not to happen. It is the same in that regard. But you know, even though you have to eat, you know, the fast food industry is manipulating and taking advantage of people's sort of emotions and desires to influence that. You know what I mean? So I think a blanket ban on the advertising of it is a very good idea. Yeah. Because you're not, again, like, it's still there. Like, Subway and Mackey's and that are still on the street. And people already know the risks. Yeah. They already know that it's not, like, healthy, or that eating it every day is probably going to make them overweight. But it's still getting shoved down their throat. Yeah.
Yes, I thought the environment section was a good one because it might have done a little bit to make people aware of how their environment and advertising and all of that is influencing their decisions. And basically, but again, to wrap that up, the environment that is out there on the street doesn't have to be the same as the environment that is in your house. So that's where we talk about things like setting up your food environment to make your life easier. You know, if you've got bags of crisps in the house, you will eat them eventually. If you don't buy them, you can't eat them, which is the simple solution to a lot of people who struggle with snacking. If the snacks aren't there, you won't eat them. If you see an advert on TV for snacks and it makes you want snacks, that's the external environment influencing you. But then if the snacks aren't there, it can't do that. And there's, you know, things like that. We've got loads of episodes to come. We've got loads of podcasts to do. We can talk about all these things in more detail in all that. But yeah, I thought that was a good section to include in terms of the environment.
Just out of interest, what was your thoughts on the smoking part?
So I just wrote down that the smoking ad comparison sort of reminded me of the cancer ad comparison last year that there was a lot of discussion over. Right. Remember that? So Cancer Research UK put that advert out saying obesity is a cause of cancer too, and it looked like a cigarette packet. And And again, it was kind of a context thing, because it was what you said there. It's not that obesity causes cancer. It's not a direct, if you are obese, this is going to cause you to get cancer. It's that if you are obese, you are doing more than likely, you are doing a lot of things in your lifestyle that do contribute to developing those kinds of problems. And so that was just something I thought of. It just, because they were talking about smoking adverts and saying how, 30 years ago, there were adverts for cigarettes saying cigarettes are cool, cigarettes make you look younger, and all these things. There's similar kind of adverts now for junk food that are saying like, and it's kind of like some of the stuff that they talked about in the Game Changers documentary, like about how junk food, like eating a massive burger is manly and this kind of thing. It influences how you think about the food and makes you want it. And so in that way, there is that comparison. But yeah, the only thing I thought of was just that it reminded me of the cancer ad from last year, which was another hotly debated topic that we're not going to get into because we're already a 45-minute segment that was only supposed to be half an hour. Right. But there was another section that was good, like the gut microbiome bit, which we're not going to get into. We'll talk.
We can have a topic.
Yeah. And when we do that as a podcast, we'll say he mentioned this in that show in the first one, but blah blah blah. But yeah, so overall summary of the show. Go.
Start time. Had some interesting parts. Was formatted poorly. And timed. The release of it was timed very poorly. Yeah. And yeah, I don't agree with the proposal of bringing the pace labeling system forward. And I think that programs like this are, the information in them is needs too much context to be broadcast to the entire population. Like you have no idea who's watching, and there's no way to frame it. I could tell you 6 different ways to frame that TV show, each of which would suit a type of person, but there's no one way to do it to suit everyone, because what's going to help someone is going to push someone else deeper into an eating disorder or something like that. So I disagree with it. I don't think they should have done it. How about you?
Yeah, basically the same. Like I've said all the way through, I thought there was some good points that I didn't expect them to go into. Things like the environment, things like the gut microbiome, that good stuff. Even as far as how calories in, calories out works, but then they just didn't explain it enough. Like you said, there wasn't enough explanation to give it factual context rather than potentially relevant context for one person but not for another, damaging to another. And that's of course why there were so many increased calls to beat the eating disorder helpline. And it's not, that tells you in itself, the way that this was done isn't just an opinion of 2 guys on a podcast or a couple of people on Twitter. It had a direct damaging effect on people, which we know happened. And so that in itself straight away says the way the show was done wasn't ideal. And hopefully, they'll learn from that because they're going to make more shows like this. And hopefully they'll learn from that. And something I thought as the show was wrapping up was the way they've got these nutritionists on the show explaining how there are different amounts of calories in proteins, carbs compared to fats, how there are different calories compared to the alcohol and the mixer that is in your drinks, and explain that. That was quite good. Why don't they have these nutritionists who are obviously good at their job, who obviously understand things, obviously coach their clients or patients if it's in the NHS, whatever? Why are they not on sort of the final board of the production of the show to watch it through and say, do you know what? We can't say it that way.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, like those nutritionists could say all the right things, but the way the producers put it together can ruin the entire thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably like the main problem with having it as a TV show is that the agenda is not to help the public.
Yeah, it's entertainment at the end of the day.
That's what they're
It's
trying
like,
to do.
look at all these people working
Yeah.
off in the back of a room. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the issue. But cool. 50 minutes. That was supposed to be 30. Great start.
To be fair, not the best. That was not a reasonable goal for us, because that was chock full of different points, really.
Yeah, we'll work on it for next time. But anyway, cool. So from the main segment, as I've been doing as we go through the show, I've been explaining to you guys, the listeners, the people watching on YouTube, if that's what you're doing, how we're structuring the show and how that's going to happen as we go into future episodes. So we've opened the show, we've done the news, we've done our main segment, and what we would usually do now is the letters segment of the show. So obviously we don't have any of that right now, but what this is for is, after me and Jim discuss whatever we're discussing that week, or if it's an interview and we talk about what was in the interview, we want to hear from you guys. We want to know what you thought of this week, for example. We want to know what you thought of the restaurant that burns off calories. What did you think of the show? Did you think along the same lines of us? Did you have a different opinion? Let us know. Drop us an email to Shaun, that's SHAUN, at Nutri-iQ.net, and let us know in an email, because we want to know what you thought. So then next week, in the letter segment, we can read that out, we can talk that over a little bit. And if you just want to let us know what you think of the podcast, of Nutri-iQ Radio in general, let us know that as well, because if you don't like it, maybe we can change things up to make it a little bit better to listen to. If you do like it, that's just nice things to hear, isn't it?
I want to hear it.
Yeah, we want to hear from you, whether it's about the context or the content, of the show, or just about the show in general. Let us know. Shaun at Nutri-iQ.net. And that brings us on to our final segment, which we're calling What We're Reading. So we're thinking each week we'll each bring something to the show of what we're reading right now, whether it's a book we're reading or something we've read in the past that we think will benefit you guys to check out as well. And one of us will bring something that we think is just good to watch, entertaining, something that just kills some time, and we want you to see anyway because we like it. So I'll go first. We'll start with the one that we're going to say is beneficial for you in terms of checking out. And for me, this is a book called Flip It, How to Get the Best Out of Everything, by a guy called Michael Heppel. And so if you're watching on YouTube, I'm just holding the book up to the camera so you can check it out. But yeah, this is one of the first books that I ever read on self-development in terms of changing the way you think so that it can be more productive. You might have read books like, what have we got on the shelf? I can't even see them because they're too far away. But there's loads of books. You might have heard of them. You might not think they're your thing because you're like, I don't need self-help. I'm better than that. But if you're thinking that, you probably do. So yeah, like I said, Flip It. The subtitle is How to Get the Best Out of Everything. And the whole point is, like we said before, we can be quite self-defeating in the way that we think sometimes. We can think to ourselves, why am I overweight? Why am I single? Why can't I get a job? Things like that. And when you ask yourselves those kinds of questions, you kind of just close yourself down because your brain is always going to come up with an answer to the question you've asked. So if you ask, why am I still overweight? Your brain will say, because you keep eating quavers. Your brain will give you an answer, and it might not be a useful answer, but that's what your brain does. And the whole point of the book is to change the way you think about situations, change the questions you ask yourself to make them more productive. So rather than asking, for example, why am I still overweight? You might change that question, sort of reframe it to say, how do I start losing weight? And then your brain will come back with an answer to say, go listen to Nutri-iQ Radio, for example. Nice plug there. Nice self-plug. But no, I'd say, well, Debbie's doing all right. Why don't you ask Debbie? Or your brain might say, well, you lost weight a couple of years back. Why don't you do that again? And it just helps you to reframe situations, see things in a better way, which right now is something that we could all probably benefit from. Like we said, we're in lockdown right now. We're out of all of our usual routines. You might be feeling that you are a little bit more fluffy around the edges, like I am, to be honest. and thinking, right, how can I get the best out of this? It's not a normal situation, but what can I do? Rather than just being a bit self-defeating and thinking, I can't do anything, because you can. You always can. And this book, like I said, it's one of my favorites, will help you find those answers you're looking for. It's Flip It by Michael Heppel. I'll put a link to it in the description, the show notes for the podcast. So that's my recommendation for the week. What have you got?
Nice. Love it. Yeah, mine's just something I've been watching. It's an easy watch. I've been sort of cycling through them. I've gone through quite a lot of series, like different TV shows. Just something I can put on in the background, and I can sit at my computer doing work while it's on. Yeah. The one I'm on at the minute is Community. Have you seen that, Shaun?
No. Is that on Netflix?
It's on Netflix.
I've seen it advertised.
It's just about a bunch of adults that have had to go to community college for various reasons. And it's a comedy. It's just like a sort of a little sort of sitcom, light-hearted comedy. But yeah, there's a lot of funny characters in there. But the star of the show is I can't remember his name. You know, Mr. Chow from The Hangover.
Oh yeah.
He's brilliant. He's a Spanish teacher, and he's just like an awful person. But he's the absolute golden nugget of the show. So yeah, definitely, if you're looking for something funny, Community. It's an easy, light-hearted watch, but it is funny.
Yeah. All right, cool. So if you're looking for something to help you get the best out of lockdown, check out Flip It. If you're looking for something to just help you get through lockdown and out the other side sane, check out Community on Netflix from Jim's recommendation. So I guess all that's left to say is thanks for tuning in to the first episode of Nutri-iQ Radio. To all of our listeners, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show. If you're listening as a podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Nutri-iQ TV on YouTube if you're watching on there. And if you want to follow us around social media, make sure you like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram at Nutri-iQ, which is without the dash. So that's everything. Goodbye from me, Shaun.
See you later, guys.
And goodbye from Jim. See you later.